really think about it, from maybe 100 and some miles, 120 miles to Area 51. So if you're flying an aircraft out of Area 51 and testing it, you're going to be 100 miles is nothing. I mean, at the speed, whatever they're traveling. I mean, you could be there in a matter of a minute or two.
Well, yeah, easily. Hey, you remember yesterday when we were talking about the crashed UFO at Roswell, and you had the theory that maybe it was something to do with electronical waves or something. I did find a report that a Lieutenant Colonel Richard French. Mm-hmm. Now he used to give out a lot of disinformation and stuff, but he actually came forward years later and said that our military shot that down. That's what he said, with a experimental weapon, and it shot from a craft from one of ours, and it shot an electrical pulse type weapon that disabled it, and that's what caused it to crash.
Yeah, I've seen that, but then I've also seen, the reports that in the area they had their experimental radar. And radar back then was not like radar nowadays. It's completely on different frequencies and all that stuff, and it actually even operates different. So maybe between one of the two, maybe is the why that craft crashed. No, I tell you, it's a weather balloon. That's we already know it's a weather balloon, right? At Roswell, it came down, made out of. And back then they didn't even have a mylar. So it would have been kind of like a canvas rubberized coating balloon. So it came crashing down with these dummies in it, right? And it so happened to take out a huge area of forest trees. And then came to a nice stop at a big, a bunch of big rocks. Come on, it was a weather balloon. We know that.
Well, don't forget also that a seasoned military major, he made a mistake. He thought it was a UFO, and here it was just a weather balloon. Even though he's been on that base and seen many of them, he just identified it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I smoke hash on Friday nights, too, doing my show. No, seriously. I mean, come on. And then the government, years later comes out and basically says the same thing, well, it's top secret experimental weather balloon. Oh, come on. Are we that naive? Come on. It's the most craziest, ludicrous stuff to come out with.
And they even recanted something about it years later and admitted they lied about it because they had to, because it was secrets and stuff. But none of it adds up. However you look at it, it's just there's something smells there.
Well, why would all of a sudden the government go up to the local mortician and say we need some small coffins?
I know, and the nurse that worked there on her deathbed, I think I mentioned it yesterday, she still said that, she's seen the bodies, and I even believe she drew a picture of it on a napkin in a restaurant to show somebody once, and the government threatens them and tries to discount them and stuff, but there you go.
Hey, when you get 90 years old, right, what can the government really do? Come up to your and shut your pacemaker off at 90-some years old? I mean, you're no threat to nobody. So, and a lot of these people waited till they got a certain age, right, where their kids were out of the house and they were kind of knowing they didn't have much time left. And then they started, leaking out the little bit of truth that they knew what was going on. And you know what? We're talking so much, I got a message that we need to go to break. So we'll be right back in 2 minutes.
You are all everybody's voting for the friendly voice of radio, the people's choice. Music, weather, sports, and news, it's radio. The people choose. Everybody's swinging to the swinging voice of radio, the people's choice. Big fry, small fry, dawn to dawn, it's radio that turns them on.
Vente, bebé, esto es para ti, amor. You can advertise your business on Night Dreams Talk Radio, and you will be heard worldwide. Why not contact us at nightdreamstalkradio@gmail.com.
You're listening to my friend Gary Anderson on Night Dreams Talk Radio, the best in paranormal radio.
Boy, what can I say, John? I'm not the best, I'm not the worst, but I'm definitely on radio. But if I forget the advertising for the radio stations, you don't hear the advertising on the show, but when we take our 2.5-minute break and play our music, the radio stations step in and they play their commercials. I blew it tonight because I'm so excited about our guest tonight, Hercules, talking about Area 51, talking about UFOs, and talking with James. I actually got him to study and be coherent about UFOs tonight, right, James?
That's right. I've been actually studying UFOs since the early 70s when I was a kid, and I've been waiting for disclosure for 40-some years, and I'm still waiting.
Yeah, well, you might wait another 47 years if you can survive that long.
Yeah.
I'm upset, because, like people like Michael W. Hall approached me, months and months ago and said, oh, there's going to be a major disclosure in UFOs. Well, then it came out that the, Navy is going to start, taking, reports about UFOs. But, I think that was well decided, after his comment. I've been hearing this since years of being in radio. Disclosure is around the corner. It's coming. But guess what? It's not coming yet. Now, I don't know. Maybe the closest thing, and I don't understand. We're talking about disclosure so much, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why aren't we talking about, and people talking about the Space Force that was created and actually now is in effect? Nobody's really talking about it because they say, oh, yeah, we already had one. So, that's just a bunch of cover-up and BS. But nobody's talking about it. We should be getting to the bottom. Why now do they finally say we got a Space Force when undoubtedly we've already had one? There's another cover-up right there. Something is going on, but nobody is talking about it. I can't find any guests to come on and talk about it. It's crazy, James.
I know. I totally get it. And, you have had a couple guests on that said that we've had a secret Space Force, and that's a whole nother ball game there. But, yeah, if there's a Space Force going on, I think we already had something going on anyway. It's just, I think, to allocate more money to it, you need to bring it to the forefront, and that's probably what they did. But, you speak on all the time, we probably should be focusing on our grid system.
Well, yeah. Well, that's the main thing to me. I think we need to put more, like I said last night, we need to be able to give more funding to NASA for they can watch these asteroids that are coming close to Earth that they only discover hours before that, they maybe might hit or bounce off the ionic sphere, or like this last one came between Earth and the satellites. Isn't that kind of scary?
Yeah, there is 4,000 plus satellites going around this Earth. And, think about this. Say one got close enough that took out a bunch of them satellites. Do you know that we would be out of cell phones and a lot of electronics? That would cause a disaster of a whole nother form.
Well, you mean I couldn't go to the bank and take my allowance out? My wife lets me have $20 a week. I couldn't go up to the cash machine and pull the money out because the satellites would be gone.
People don't realize how much our society revolves around satellites. It's a shame that, I've actually went to the store before and a computer was out and they said, well, can't sell you nothing. Well, 7 cents on the dollar is pretty easy to figure out, but nope, got to shut her down.
Oh, what's really interesting, and I've seen this. A lot of the computers now are, your cash registers are not a separate cash register. They feed into a computer at the store or wherever, right?
Yeah.
And if something goes down, the clerk, they came and make change. Don't even know how to make change. They can't even, you hand them a $10 bill for an item that say it's $4.79. Their mouth drops open and they try to figure out how to give you change.
I know. I've been through that. They actually shut the stores down here. I'm like, how did we ever make it 15, 20 years ago? Hello? Not to mention back in the 70s.
Oh, I know. And again, I want to talk about now, or June 23rd of this year in Las Vegas, a bright white circular object just hovered for 2 minutes and then vanished.
Another hovering object. And I bet there was no sound with that one either.
It doesn't say.
Yeah. Jeez.
And then it jumps up to July 6th in Las Vegas again for 10 seconds, a circular object in the night sky.
Wow. And, there's got to be something to it. I just wonder if it's not ours out there experimenting at night way up high with spy aircraft or whatever.
Well, look at some of these bombers and stealth bombers and fighters, that were tested in Area 51. And going back even in the 70s and 80s, like the B-1, people who first time saw them would look at it like, oh, my God. They're used to seeing a bomber, right? It looks like a B-52. Mm-hmm. Okay, something that was built in the 50s, that, big old wing, that the jet engines hanging off the wings, and then seeing something really stealthy and spacey looking, like from the movies. I could see people seeing something like that at night, and that's another reason why they paint them black. They kind of like nighttime, you don't see them. But, I mean, the whole point is that somebody that's not used to seeing something like that, they would think guess what? It's a UFO.
Well, I got news for you. Roughly 30 years or less, that's when they were testing these things and stuff. And if you look at those at certain angles, even in the daylight with certain sun ray on it, you would think they're UFOs. And I got to tell you, I was on top of this steel mill one time, about 200 feet up. We was tearing it down. And coming from behind me, one of those came. I don't know, there was a base close by, and probably did, doing a test run or whatever. But you couldn't hear them. They're totally silent until they get on the other side of you, and then they about blow you off the building. And you talk about spooky. When you never see something like that before, it looks like a UFO or something.
I don't know. One of my guests, James, I had on, he wrote a book about, in Texas, the Aurora. Okay, where, this UFO hit the water. Windmill, right, and then crashed. But I was talking to him before air, and his father was a police dispatcher in this, back, Midwest, or not even Midwest, down south, I guess, maybe, in a small town. And he got a report that a UFO, landed in the small hospital parking lot.
Oh, my goodness.
And, so he kind of thought it was a joke, and this is what the story was that was told. And then he finally dispatched, police officers to go check it out. Well, the time the police officers got there, there was no craft, but there was like this 25 or 50 foot round pattern, right, burnt into the asphalt, still smoking and burning, and like mercury drops around it, but no spacecraft. That's kind of weird, isn't it?
That is weird. That kind of, let me ask you this: did they repaved it and stuff?
Yeah. Well, what happened is so they put the barrier up, don't enter and all that stuff. Well, the next morning they were going to check on it again and whatever during the daylight, and all of a sudden sometime during the night, the whole parking lot at the hospital was blacktopped.
Wow, that reminds me also of Texas. Back in Dayton, Texas, I think it was the early '80s. Landrum, I think the lady's name was. There was two women and their grandson, and they had encountered almost a similar type thing. It was hot and leaking things that made their car real hot, and they've got radiation burns and all kind of stuff from it. And they've seen a bunch of helicopters like escorting away this craft. And supposedly afterwards, there was a big stretch of that road they were on that was removed and redone. Same principle. Interesting, too. Also, it was interesting in this little town. I just can't remember the name of the town. I did call up, and the librarian was really nice and did some research. And yes, at that time frame that the guy gave, they had a report of a UFO landing in the hospital parking lot. So that made the local newspaper